Perfect. Okay, in that case, next thing for me to do is to pass over to Councillor Carroll, who's going to say a few words, I believe.
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name's Dean, Councillor Dean Carroll. I'm Cabinet Member for it's a rather lofty title that I'm supposed to use, of physical infrastructure, but I prefer to say it exactly how it is, which is highways, assets and built housing. If it's roads or if it's buildings, it's me. So I'm delighted to be here in Clun tonight. I haven't had the chance to get down here since before the last lockdown. And one of my favourite parts of the job of a cabinet member is actually getting out around to our market towns and villages around the county and actually meeting people face to face and talking to people. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to come down to the far southwest of our patch today and talk to you about an exciting collaboration project that directly affects all of you in the community. Now, as Ryan's touched on, this is a collaboration project between Shropshire Council, Clun Town Council, WSP and the local community. And what's enabled it, what's made it possible for us to bring this forward is a funding grant we received from the Department for Transport for drainage works. And I won't steal the thunder of Victoria and Andy and the WSP guys who will go on to deal the detail later, but that's what's made this entire project possible. Now, the reason that we're here this evening, either in person or virtually, and the reason that we've been here today and we've got the online portals is that as a genuine collaboration effort, we want to know from the community, from the town council and from the residents who live here, actually, what are the needs, what are the priorities, how should we be phasing work that goes on in Clun, because you're better placed than we are to know what will work in your community. And so that's why we're doing this kind of an engagement exercise. I think I've said everything that I needed to say, only to thank Clun Town Council and our IT team for making this possible and for inviting us down here in the first place. I'd be fascinated, very interested to hear everything you've got to say. That's why we're recording, because we want to make sure that we capture everything that everybody says and it isn't lost or drop between the pages. So say exactly what you think and what you want to see in terms of this project.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much indeed. Next, I'm going to hand over to Andy, who's going to introduce us to the project.
Thank you, Ian. And yeah, a very, very warm welcome to everybody. And as Dean said, thank you ever so much for making the effort to come out and engage with the work. So we're delighted to have you with us and delighted to hear your feedback. And I hope you find the presentation and information on the project helpful. So, I mean, just initially, I'd just like to mention the fact that, you know, the hybrid event that we've hosted tonight is a combination of, you know, online and virtual sort of engagement plus, you know, people attending in person. This isn't ideally how we wanted it to be. You know, the ongoing pandemic has made it hard to plan events such as this. And part of the thinking behind this was it gave us some resilience and allowed the event to continue in some format, even if we were impacted. And you know, this is kind of the best that we can kind of produce just at the moment, given the current circumstances. But I just want to say thank you ever so much to everybody, you know, who supported creating the event this evening. And I know an awful lot of work has gone into it. So in terms of the project itself, I mean, we've been working on this since 2018. It's been a collaborative exercise between Shropshire Council and Clun Town and Chapel Lawn Parish Council, and you know, it's been a long-running exercise. And you know, the initial work was to help try and create this vision and try and enable the outcomes that Clun was hoping for. And it's been a lot of hard work to get this far. And as Dean touched on, it's had to involve some external funding to bring some of the work to life, which, you know, we're delighted we've received, and it's going to help move this project along at greater pace. So, you know, the presentation is really going to start, you know, informing you and enlightening you about the work that's been undertaken. And really the project involves, you know, a wide span of disciplines, hence the reason we've got different colleagues on the call tonight to help inform that discussion, because there's lots of aspects to it, lots of different work streams that are fed into it, and this working group has been informed by lots of different individuals along the way. Okay, Ian. Thank you. So this plan is the original aspirational plan that I remember seeing at Shire Hall. I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago now, but it's you know, four years ago which when this was produced, and you know, and it was really the catalyst for the Clun working group coming together and starting to create this this vision and this plan that's been worked on sort of since then, and is now at the point where we can share some of the thinking with you. And really the aspiration was to allow, you know, a combination of things to come together that enabled movement and you know, and sort of modal shift in Clun, but also sort of address some of the historic traffic management features that had been put in that had created clutter through the town. And started to sort of shape our thinking around what the future of Clun could be if all of the project aspirations came together. And Ben Hamilton Bailey was an expert in the highways industry, and you know, helped shape the vision and offer a new way of thinking in town centres that has really influenced how this project has been shaped. It sort of gave a vision for urban design and helped influence the thinking that has been really sort of influential in the background and really driving the sort of the vision and the plan for the project. Okay, Ian. So the approach that Town Council and Shropshire have adopted really was to try and support progress and try and, you know, create an environment where this project could come to life. That needed to involve lots of different aspirations and lots of different areas. We cover drainage, we cover streetscape, we cover highway maintenance, and an awful lot of aspirations in that vision as well. And the working group was really to set up that and help that collaborative working, which we think was a critical factor in helping to achieve all of the local objectives. And put together a project that was coherent, but also delivered on these visions and the aspirations for the project going forward. Okay. So as I've touched on before, the funding was critical really to help move this project forward. So we put a challenge fund bid in and were successful. We weren't successful in the initial bid, but we were successful in a subsequent bid that went to DFT, and that really looked at flooding, hotspot flooding in sort of key locations in Shropshire. Clun being one of those locations, and that bid was sort of verified, and we were awarded money to start moving the project forward. And the drainage element to this is critical because understanding the issues around the current drainage was sort of fundamental to help move the project forward, because the drainage asset, if you're going to invest money in your drainage network, really carriageway resurfacing of the high street and other locations in the town needed to follow that, because, you know, the last thing we wanted to do was resurface key areas and then have to dig them up to put in, you know, drainage systems and connections and all of the other things that went with it. So the project focused on drainage. You know, that's been a big part of it, you know, river drainage and also highway maintenance. The actual key areas have been focused around the high street, but there's also other areas that we've looked at and incorporated within the plan. We've also looked in detail at the streetscape and the town strategy and how that can build the aspirations, and then you know, that part of it needs to follow on from the drainage and the carriageway maintenance. Once the resurfacing work has been completed, that effectively gives us a blank canvas, and we can start to look at all of the lining and other features that would complement the town centre going forward. And then the other key project was the Hgv signing, and helping to develop a local strategy. And you know, the key factor, of course, is to try and deter as much Hgv traffic coming through the town as possible. Okay, Ian?
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Andy. Now we're going to hand over to Cameron, who's going to go through the details of the drainage side of things.
Thanks, Ian. Yes, good evening, everyone. As the other presenters have already alluded to, thank you very much for coming down and joining us today. Hopefully you find the presentation useful and interesting. As I said, as we said at the start, Bruce Bartlett is also here from the drainage team, a senior engineer at WSP, so is on hand to answer any questions with myself at the end. And it was just useful to note here that you may be aware that Stephen Roberts is also from WSP, who unfortunately can't be with us this evening on the call, who was kind of planning to take the presentation, but he has been working on the project with myself and Bruce, so can feed into this at a later date. But yeah, just to start off with on the drainage aspects then, and as Andy alluded to, the council was successful in their bid to receive funding from the Department of Transport, or the DFT, to tackle highway related flooding and highway related surface water flooding. And here I just wanted to kind of touch on our kind of remit, and the brief of this is kind of primarily to look at the pluvial side of things, so the surface water, rather than the fluvial and the River Clun flooding, but I can touch on that a little bit later on. But if you kind of you'll hear me talk a lot about surface water, the flooding and the highway flooding, and that's what kind of really we wanted to concentrate on at the outset. So we've done, as it says on the slides there, we've done quite a lot of kind of collecting of data and investigating over the last few months, and since kind of last summer really. And some drainage surveys are set to continue in this year, which will include CCTV surveys to ascertain the condition and the connectivity of systems in Clun. And kind of following this data collection and investigations, we've highlighted some hotspot areas, we like to call them hotspots, in Clun town that suffer from surface water flooding. And we have recommended solutions and recommended ways to improve these going forward. So next slide, please, Ian. Yes, so I wanted to include this map here because you may be thinking or maybe asking why we've chosen those specific locations. And we've tried to collect data in as many different ways as we can. So that's included site visits to Clun and talking face to face with the town council, including town councillors and members of the public and residents of Clun. But it's also included looking at data from the council and what the Shropshire Council have provided to us. So this map here shows an example of an area in Clun where public reporting data has been collected. So when you go onto the website, the Shropshire Council website, or if you ring the number and report an issue with the highway or drainage, this gets collated into a system. And then using the software available to us, we can produce plans like this one and categorize them into the different types of flooding and drainage issues. So we, for example, here we've just differentiated them with different color stars to make it a bit kind of pleasing on the eye. But then from that, we can produce heat maps. So the blue heat map kind of colors you can see on the screen there kind of show that how concentrated the reports are. So you can see here that Church Street, Bridge Street and the High Street just outside the garage, there's got a lot of concentration of past issues. So that's kind of, we've taken that into account when we've been choosing our hotspots. So I thought that was a really kind of a useful thing to just to give an example of the different sources of information that we've looked at to date. Next slide, please, Ian. Yeah, so here we've just listed the hotspots we have currently identified, and this information is also on the banner boards with a bit more information in the table on the board. So I didn't want to just regurgitate what's on the board here, but I can quickly scan over them now. So we've got 7 hotspots, and then you may be thinking again why Clun Bridge was included, because that's not really surface water flooding. But on our first and second site visits to Clun and speaking with local residents, the issue around the gravel at Clun Bridge was an obvious issue, and we wanted to help tackle that kind of at the outset and immediately, really. So over the summer last year, we worked with our contacts from the Environment Agency to try and get that sorted. And in September last year, as you're aware, gravel was removed from the upstream side of the bridge. And we are aware that there are issues, obviously, with the downstream, and that wasn't cleared, and some involvement needed here from Natural England. And we are aware that the town council is keen to kind of set up a maintenance regime on the Clun Bridge. And as WSP, obviously, we're here to offer assistance wherever needed. But that's basically the reasoning behind why Clun Bridge was included in the hotspots. And then the remaining 6, again, kind of going back to the last slide, came from the conversations on site with residents, emails and phone calls, but also the data we received from Shropshire Council. If you go into the next slide, please, Ian. Yeah, so I wanted to put a slide to kind of emphasise the joined up approach. And like we've heard already, the whole point of this engagement event is to show the collaboration that's happened to date and that will be happening in the future to try and provide what the community needs going forward. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of things in particular. So we've mentioned the streetscape and carriageway improvements, and Andy's alluded to that we don't want to propose drainage kind of and then in a year's time during the resurfacing works that gets dug up and kind of that's wasted time and wasted money. So we want to ensure that kind of all disciplines are on the right lines and joined up in their approach. And I've just put a couple of examples there. So in the streetscape proposals, in the future proposals, there may be a curb realignment, for example. So we don't want to propose a gully or a new set of pipe work, and then we realise that the curb's been realigned in a year's time. So we want to make sure that obviously we want to provide the best for the community in this instance. And then the second bullet point there is about the Clun Strategic Liaison Group. So this is a group that's been recently set up by Shropshire Council and includes the Environment Agency, Natural England and Severn Trent Water, and basically does what it says on the slide. They wanted to come together to provide a response to the ecological and environmental challenges of the whole Clun catchment. So not just Clun town, but the whole catchment. And we've been, as WSP, we've been in touch with the group, and they know about the DFT, the project, and what's going on in Clun. And although our remit and the project is to reduce flooding, as we're all aware, the sensitivities around the ecology and the environment associated with the special area of conservation downstream and the freshwater permussels, that does have to come into our considerations, and that has been mentioned on the boards as well. So just wanted to touch on that here. So it is part of our considerations moving forwards. Thanks, Ian. And yeah, so the last kind of couple of slides on the drainage then, probably the most important, but the recommendations that we've come up to date. And the first slide here is to talk about the improvements we think that can happen within the current funding. And as I said before, more information can be found on the boards linked to the specific hotspots, but I can just run through these quickly now. So we've got some areas of the town that we've identified. The current drainage systems are inadequate, for example, on Bridge Street. So our recommendations will include replacing some of that system and potentially having the scope to extend that to capture more surface water. We've identified a number of outfalls of the River Clun, which can be upgraded to kind of stop water backing up in the system. There are some locations as part of our investigation so far that we believe that some of the drainage just has collapsed or is broken, and that it might just be a case of repairing what's there. And then watercourse maintenance and ditch improvements. So in some locations in Clun, the land drainage does interact with the highway drainage. So we need to make sure that the outfalls and the watercourses are maintained. And obviously this sometimes relies on riparian and landowner engagement. So we'll have a look at that as well. And we do know at least one area in the town that suffers from foul discharge onto the highway. So this will involve engagement with statutory undertakers to sort this issue out. And then the next slide, thank you. Yeah, the next slide just summarises some improvements we've identified if any additional funding can be made available. So the first one here is natural flood management, commonly abbreviated to NFM. It's being used throughout the country, but also throughout the county in Shropshire. Very recently, and WSP and Shropshire Council are working hard to improve these projects and get more of these projects out there and getting constructed, because they're sustainable projects and they use natural processes to slow the flow upstream. So we've identified a couple of areas, including the Waterloo area of Clun, potentially could benefit from some NFM measures. The second one, similar to the last slide, we've got some engagement and collaboration with statutory undertakers. So namely here, it would be Severn Trent Water, because we could access some funding potentially in the future but to remove the surface water out of their systems and get some funding for that and divert it somewhere else. And then the last bullet point here is talking about the fluvial, so the River Clun, the River Clun, kind of a strategy to mitigate against river flooding. And because River Clun is classed as main river, that would need discussions with the Environment Agency. And yeah, and just kind of the last thing links with that bullet point really, as we progress with this project since last year, we're always in collaboration, in contact with the Drainage and Flood Risk Manager at Shropshire Council, who is aware of the event tonight. We've updated him in our most recent call last week, and regarding the main river flooding and the River Clun, he's more than happy for Clun Town Council to get in touch and use his contacts at the Environment Agency to arrange a meeting if that's something that is benefit to the town council, and that can be progressed through that route as well. So we just wanted to point out that the Drainage and Flood Risk Manager, for obvious reasons, is interested in what we're doing here in Clun and is in the know with our progress meetings, and is happy to help out wherever he can with discussions with the Environment Agency. But that's all from the drainage point of view at the moment. Like I said at the start, myself and Bruce are here to answer any questions at the end, should you have any. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks very much indeed, Cameron. Next, we're going to hand back to Andy to talk about carriageway maintenance. Thank you, Ian.
Yes, so carriageway maintenance, I think we've touched on this in terms of kind of the project choreography. You know, the resurfacing need is evident. We've sort of flagged that up through our reactive maintenance data analysis. There was key areas within Clun that were identified as a priority for resurfacing and carriageway maintenance. However, as we've mentioned before, due to some of the preparatory works that are within the scope of the project, we're currently looking at that in terms of scheduled once the drainage work has been completed, so we don't undertake work that we then have to come in and disrupt if we get the sequencing incorrect. So we've tried to sort of undertake reactive work and keep as many of these defects safe as possible. Because the need for resurfacing is evident and defects are present. All of that is known to us, recorded in our data set. So yeah, it is captured within the project, and we're currently working on that timeline. Okay, can you knock on to the next one, Ian? Thank you. So we're currently in the process of developing that whole project plan, and the resurfacing elements are still under consideration, but they include the key areas that you might expect through the high street, and we will also look at what else we think we need to bring into scope, because it's quite possible some of the drainage work could be involve some sort of significant work, and it might be that resurfacing beyond that is required, but we haven't quite got to that point yet. But there is quite a lot of carriageway resurfacing within the scope of this project. Okay, thank you, Ian.
That's great. Thanks very much, Andy. Now, on the streetscape side, unfortunately, our colleague Stuart, who was going to be presenting on this one, is unwell. I think he's another victim of COVID. So Sam has very kindly agreed to step in and cover this section. So over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so next slide, please, if we can. Yeah, so on behalf of the Clun Highways and Town Working Group, Shropshire Council have funded the development of a streetscape design guide, which is essentially a document that looks to provide a clear set of guidelines for what the highway in Clun looks like and how it functions going forward. It's intended to be used by anyone, and by anyone that covers the Town Council, Shropshire Council and any future delivery partners who might be involved in any highway development work within the town, to help them inform their future decisions on the materials and the features that they should be putting back, essentially, to accord with the overall vision that's been created. And it will also inform what's reinstated as part of any of the major drainage and carriageway maintenance work that Cameron and Andy have already touched on. Next slide, please. So the development of guide is built upon the local traffic management aspirations. So the plan that we shared at the start of the presentation, which had been developed within the community, all of this was communicated by the working group. And we've also incorporated some current best practice into that document as well. And the guide has a series of high-level principles that it looks to reflect, and these include minimising street clutter, recognising movement and place functions, balancing the needs of all users, not just motorists, not just pedestrians, looking at safety of the streetscape across the board, taking into consideration the local distinctiveness that Clun has, conservation and creation of a sense of place, looking at the environmental values. As Cameron said, there's a lot of ecological sensitivity within Clun that we need to incorporate going forwards. Looking at whole life value, which is very important, and making sure that appropriate materials are selected for various different areas, and also to accord with the local aspirations that the town has as a whole. Next slide, please. So as part of the initial development work, Stuart came down to Clun and he met with a number of local people, and I think he spent the best part of the day having a good walk around, talking to everybody to get a real sense of what are the main issues that the town currently has, and what are the key constraints that we need to build into this document going forward to make sure that any future plan that's developed considers these. And these have all been put together, and sort of a visual representation of that has been prepared so that anyone that comes along in the future can clearly see what kind of the areas that they need to be most cognizant of when developing any future proposals. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've also incorporated industry best practice. So this has looked at similar schemes that have been implemented elsewhere in the country, general just best practice within streetscape design. And these have included in the document in the forms of changing the layout of the street so that it works better. So not just having a straight road down the middle and a footway either side, if that isn't what works best for this particular scenario. Creating spaces for people to gather and meet, which is obviously quite important in a town like Clun, where it's quite a social place as well. Formalising on-street parking so that there is dedicated space for people to park, providing areas of planting and sustainable urban drainage within the streetscape, protecting areas which are most at risk from vehicle overrun at the edge of carriageway. I know there's areas around the bridge that suffer, significantly from this problem, and applying a creative use of materials to enhance the street appearance as well. Next slide, please. whilst a number of different areas and potential improvements and features have been identified, this has all been brought together in an overarching vision, which has been developed to ensure that any potential improvements work alongside other interventions such as the drainage and carriageway maintenance work, to make sure that all improvement works are unified across the board, to ensure that opportunities are maximised within the funding available. So to make sure we make best use of the money and put back the best situation for Clun, and to make sure that for future funding requests and bids, that robust bids can be put together using the basis of the Streetscape. Next slide, please. So there are three key elements that the Streetscape Design Guide, the town strategy, looks to cover. And the first of these is the creation of a simplified street hierarchy. The idea behind this is that it looks to categorise streets to enable appropriate measures to be implemented, and creating a hierarchy has the benefits that it creates a clear identity for Clun. It establishes clear transitional gateways on each approach to the town. It establishes improved driver behaviour and reduced speed because, you know, there's consistency about what's almost like expected from drivers as they move through the town. And it allows us to create a greater pedestrian focus in the areas where it's needed most, so particularly around Bridge Street and the High Street where the focus of pedestrian activity is. Next slide, please. So the next key element is the creation of a 20-mile-an-hour town. This would be achieved through street design rather than the classic of throwing up lots of repeater signs. So as I've mentioned before about creating the gateways to the town and then having features of the street which encourage and remind drivers that they are in a low speed environment. And this has the benefits of that it encourages slower moving traffic around Clun, it aids wayfinding for motorists, it promotes road safety, and it gives a greater confidence for pedestrians and other non-motorised users to move because of the slower traffic speeds that we have in the town. Next slide, please. The vision also seeks to set out and create a town trail. Clun has a number of wonderful features and interesting places and lots going on in it. And the idea is that by creating a town trail, we provide clear and legible wayfinding for Clun, and particularly for visitors that come. It allows them to fully see what the town has to offer, access that in a nice, easy, clear manner, and it also creates the potential for in the future for digital wayfinding, so the use of apps and that kind of technology for visitors in the town. Next slide, please. So the kind of the part of the strategy is that it looks to provide a priority of improvements, and this has helped to identify all the potential project areas within Clun across the streetscape, and it looks to create an order in which projects can be taken forward. So it identifies those into the highest priority projects, which you know would be put forward front of the list, the medium priority projects, and then the sort of the lower scale priority projects, which look more to longer term. And this can help with future funding applications because it demonstrates that there's a clear delivery strategy for improvements within the town. Next slide, please. I think that's it.
Yep, thanks very much indeed. So that covers the streetscape side of things. We're actually going back to Sam now to talk about Hgv Route Management.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So the working group asked Shropshire Council to review the existing route signing scheme in the area around Clun. It wasn't just focused on the sort of town centre, if you like. We looked at a wide area going right out in all directions, sort of out to the sort of major A roads that surround Clun. And as part of that study, it was noted that was inconsistent and missing route signage in many of the areas, and this resulted in vehicles travelling through Clun when really there's much better alternative routes. This kind of through traffic, and you know, it's focused around heavy goods vehicles combined with the historic street layout in Clun, has resulted in a long-running documented cases of damage to both public and private property within the town. It's created safety issues for all road users, as well as congestion and obstruction. As part of our regular working group meetings, we regularly hear about the incidents that are caused by HGVs moving through the town, the damage they're doing to everybody's property. And we have built up a really strong picture of the effect this has had. Next slide, please. So building on all of the early survey work that was undertaken by the Town Council, Shropshire Council commissioned WSP to undertake a full review of the existing signage, and we prepared a full detailed inventory, consisting of locations, photographs of the signs, the conditions of the signs, and this really highlighted that there were clear gaps in the signage for HGVs travelling in the area. There was a significant inconsistency in signage both along single routes, so having the same message but relayed in several different sign types, and also area wide as well. So for we recognise that a lot of the HGVs are sort of coming from outside of the area through the area, and the message they're getting isn't consistent. We also noted that there was a number of missing, damaged and obstructed signage in several locations, which was really not helping. To this end, we then prepared an outlined strategy which had an indicative area-wide design, which looked to encourage HGVs to use alternative routes such as the A4113, the A49 and the A489. And the outline proposals that we prepared included replacing existing signage and supplementing signage to ensure that there was the same signs and that they were placed at regular intervals, at sensible locations, junctions, that sort of thing. And also that the existing advisory restriction signage on the B4368 was all replaced to ensure that it was consistent. It was noted that, again, we had the same message, but in several different formats, which doesn't make it easy for people to follow. Next slide, please. So at the request of the working group, the scope of our study was extended to consider some additional options, not just assigning. So we were asked to look at how we could introduce a formal traffic regulation order into the town, and also the sort of potential of reclassifying the A488 from an A road to a B road between Knighton and Lindham. So environmental TROs, traffic regulation orders, are used to legally restrict the size of vehicles that can use a specific road, and they do require a statutory process to be followed. Within Clun, there are three options for applying a TRO. We could either have prohibition of good vehicles applied directly to Clun Bridge, look at width or length limits applied to the bridge alone, or look at having either a weight, width or length restriction applied to the town as an area-wide basis. All of the options allow for an acceptable access exemption to be included. So this would allow for vehicles that legitimately need to enter Clun, such as to service the shops and the pubs and various businesses, to be allowed to do so, but would prevent through access. And as I said, traffic regulation orders follow a statutory process which requires consultation with a number of key stakeholders and allows for where there's a weight of objections, so where a significant number of objections are received, these will have to be considered with due merit. Next slide, please. So local members of the working group were given an opportunity to discuss all of the various options with West Mercia Police, and they were taken through the full advantages and disadvantages of each of the option. A discussion was then held, and a recommendation was made that we would progress the area-wide signage strategy forward, and this was agreed by the Town Council on the basis that the success of this signage strategy is monitored, and that the option to implement a TRO in any of the three options we previously outlined, that this could be revisited in the future should that be needed. Thanks, Ian.
That's great. Thanks very much indeed, Sam. So for the final presentation of this evening, before we get to the questions, I'm going to hand back to Andy to talk about the way forward.
Thanks, Ian. So, in terms of the next steps, so we've covered in some detail there all of the different packages of work that have been included in the project so far. We're currently, working those up, and progress is continuing. So in order to sort of start understanding how we're going to sort of progress this through to the next stages, we've developed a program. And that program of work is going to help guide our thinking as we go through the next financial year. Now we've got funding in place for elements of the work, and design is at a fairly advanced stage. Okay, can you just move to the next slide here? So this indicative program will continue to sort of be the guiding instrument as we go through the project. It's been quite dynamic up until now, so we've been looking at how these pieces come together, and as the funding has been secured, we've been able to start to sort of put some more robust timescales around some of these pieces of work. We will be maximising opportunities to accelerate any of the schemes should that be possible. And I think we will also look at the programming of some of the work. So, as we move through the project, certainly the resurfacing through the high street, we're aware that that's going to be disruptive and is going to require some diversions. And there might be appropriate times that for the community that makes sense, or it would be less disruptive. And thinking about things like harvesting periods or tourism periods through the summer holidays, there might be times that it's very sensible to avoid. So as we start to work that up, we will be looking to consult and engage, and the working group will help to consider some of that. But then we might look to have more detailed discussions about that as we go forward. So that's the indicative timeline as it currently stands, and we're looking to sort of move some of this forward quite quickly. The Hgv signing project is a standalone piece of work, so that will start imminently. So there is significant progress starting to be made as we go into the next financial year. Okay, next slide, Ian. So yeah, we're looking at the sort of short term now. So we're finalising the design on the drainage. Cameron has highlighted the work that's been done on the hotspots. We know carriageway maintenance in the significant part is going to sit beyond the drainage work, but due to some of the deterioration that we've seen, we might look to step in and do some small scale maintenance work to try and make sure that carriageway is maintained and kept safe. The streetscape is we're finalising those documents following the engagement and the feedback, and we'll see how that one goes. And then I've just touched on the Hgv route signing as well. Okay, next slide, please, Ian. So the next steps, really, in terms of the work, we will continue to develop and pull all of the strands together for the individual streams of work. And of course, the working group that's been established, that has been mentioned a few times, will continue to be the governing process for shaping the project and moving it forward. And I think the collaboration so far has been really good and has made this project possible and helped get us to where we are today. And then we will continue to monitor the funding and maximise opportunities for additional funding as and when they present themselves. Okay, thank you, Ian.
Thanks very much indeed, Andy, and thanks to all our presenters this evening. I think we've made a good job of dealing with the technical limitations, so appreciate everyone's efforts there, and thank you in the audience as well. We've got a good deal of time for questions now, so we've got the experts here to answer your questions. If you'd like to ask any questions, please put your hand up, and if when you ask the question, you could just give your name first, please, and then ask your question.
Yes, good evening. My name's John French. I live on the approach to Clun. As somebody in my past life, do you want to hold that one? As somebody in my past life worked in highway drainage and developmental drainage, I recognise a lot of the buzzwords and buzz phrases that have been said tonight. But one phrase that I haven't heard of very much of is general maintenance. You can put the most innovative, expensive drainage system in that you want. But unless there is ongoing maintenance, then it's going to block up and you're going to be back to square one. I would say that at least half of the problems that we've got down here are due to the fact that there hasn't been ongoing maintenance of the highway assets for quite a number of years. When I first moved here, we used to get the drains cleared out every year. On the outskirts of Clun, it took 4 years before I managed to get the drains cleared. And you are going to get blockages, you are going to get breakages, and you are going to get things that go wrong. And unless we maintain it, what I wanted to know is, has that been costed into what you are doing? The other question I've got is regarding the Hgv. You can put as many signs out as you like, but unless there's going to be enforcement, we're wasting our time. Has that been costed into with regards to West Mercia Police, about actual police or council officers coming down here and enforcing what is going on? Because if the drivers know that there's no enforcement, they're going to ignore it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, John. I will hand over to Andy for the first question at least.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, good evening, John. I could talk to you for an awful long time about drainage maintenance, and you know, the points you've raised are really valid. They really are, and it's an area that of significant focus and has been for at least 12 months now. And I mean, I'll try and keep my answer as sort of succinct as I can, but it's quite a big subject area, this one. But the highlights really are that, you know, I recognise the concerns that you've mentioned, and over the last 12 months we've developed a new sort of in-house drainage, a specialist drainage team that that is now going to undertake an awful lot of the reactive maintenance work for us. The contract that we let, the term maintenance contract with Kia that was let, didn't focus particularly brilliantly on drainage. And as a result, some of the maintenance issues that you've highlighted have become very apparent on the network. I'm really pleased to say that that has changed. The three teams that we've got now focused north, central, south, are kitted out. They're very, very experienced. We've recruited some very capable individuals who've got, you know, high-powered jetting units, route cutting kit, cameras, and I'm delighted to say that we're really getting on top of drainage maintenance. So, albeit your concerns are very valid and they're correct, I'm really confident that we've got the teams in place now to help manage these and undertake, you know, proper routine maintenance activities that actually prevent problems occurring on the network.
And Hgv enforcement. Sam, do you want to say something on that?
Yeah. So yeah, you're quite right. Enforcement is a recognised issue, and when we had a conversation with West Mercia Police, quite a lot of it focused around the area of enforcement, which is why for the initial signing, it's been requested from the working group that the success of that's monitored. So and over a period of time, I think, you know, data will be collected and it will be, you know, assessed really, does the signing have much impact? A lot of the restrictions are advisory, so there is limited sort of enforcement that can be done, but obviously with the traffic regulation orders, they can be legally enforced. It does, as you rightly say, rely on resource from the police, and as we're well aware, resource is very stretched from the police, but you know, they are on board with that, should that option be taken forward. But as I said, yeah, enforcement is something that is recognised, which is why, you know, Shropshire committed to monitor the success of any signing scheme, and if it's found that it's not providing the benefits that it should, that we can look into sort of alternative solutions, such as a legally enforceable regulation order. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Sam. Could we have our next question, please? Oh, there's another hand up.
Hi, it's Bob Carvey. Just following on from the drainage, water management in the Clun was mentioned a little bit, but I think there's a fundamental problem, which certainly I had a long conversation with Stephen about. Whether or not something's happened upstream that brings water down faster, we don't know. But I noted that there is provision at the bottom of the list, of one of those lists, to do something perhaps towards that. But the fact of the matter is that most of the water from the roadways, the highways in Clun, ends up in the River Clun. It's designed like that years ago. And it's fine, you can send it down. It's probably coming down just as fast today along the roads as it would be going through the drains. But when it reaches the bottom and the river is high, then it won't go anywhere, no matter what you do under the current circumstances. And it just helps to flood the houses at the bottom. So whilst I can appreciate that for the last 7, 8, 9 years that the drains up in the square have been full of silt, the same amount of water has just run down the road to the bottom of the hill. Bringing it down the pipe isn't going to change the problem that we have at the bottom when the whole area just fills up much more quickly. You badly need and I've spent hours on to the Environment Agency, and I've been instrumental in getting the Clun cleared of gravel, but there's a fundamental project that needs doing about what's happened as to why the river raises so quickly now, and can that be alleviated? In simple terms, we're talking about perhaps a concrete wall, probably no more than about a foot above the bottom of the bridge now, and then fill in with back soil. Because unless you hold the water back and put non-return valves on the outlets from your drainage, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, it's only 7 or 8 houses that are flooded versus all the ones we see that are on the 7. But, you know, thanks very much for getting the water perhaps quicker to the bottom there, but it's not solving the overall problem for the town. And on an A road.
That's right. Thanks very much indeed for that question, Bob. I'm going to hand over to Cameron.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, and I do remember the email exchanges with Stephen. So yeah, thanks for the questions and the comments. Obviously, this will be if we record and take these comments on board. With the I think I mentioned briefly in the slides about how the land drainage interacts with the highway drainage. So we are aware of the outfalls. Obviously, that's where all the water goes at the end, like you mentioned. So that's why we need to make sure that as part of what we're proposing in our designs, the outfalls are adequate. And I know you mentioned the Environment Agency and the River Clun, and as part of our designs and proposals, we do need to work with them, like you said, to make sure that they are aware of what we're doing, and the outfalls, especially at Bridge Street, like you mentioned, is suitable. And you mentioned at the start about the historic potential diversions, and we've had a look into that a brief sense, and as it's not kind of a part of the kind of current DFT funding, but we do know historically that there has been some land drainage, fluvial changes within Clun. Obviously, without analysing that in depth, we won't be able to say the extent of that, but we are aware of kind of historic land drainage systems in Clun and how they've potentially been changed over the last kind of few years. But yeah, I totally understand that your comments, and I don't know if Bruce wants to add anything to that.
We can't hear you, Bruce. And that's still. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you. No, sorry. Our first real technical problem of the evening. It was going to happen sooner or later, wasn't it? It was just a matter of time. We'll see if we can get that sorted and see if we can come back to Bruce a bit later for any comments on that. In the meantime, does anyone else have a question? Any more questions for us this evening? Hand at the back.
Okay. Hello, my name's Tom Eyre. I live at Bicton, and I'm really just here
because the concern of whenever there's any work goes on in Clun or any problems with the bridge, or any diversions have to be put in, an awful lot of traffic gets sent via Picton if it's going up the valley, then hence to Whitcock Keysett and over the Ponty Links Bridge. This is a single track road, lane, and if we're going to have any more diversions put in place, I think we need some serious maintenance on these roads as well. It's not just the centre of Clun that needs maintenance, it's all the peripheral as well. Thank you.
Okay, Andy, do you want to take that?
Yeah, more than happy to take that. So again, without sort of going into too much detail, I mean the road network in and around Clun, you know, there are sections that are within our forward maintenance plan. There are sections that we know require investment, we know require work, and when we come to start looking at our forward plan, we will be considering which roads in the local area are going to be prioritised for investment. You know, the deterioration of the highways asset is not just a problem that's unique to Shropshire. It's a national issue, and we are trying to get the best out of our funding and also attract more funding into highway maintenance to try and get the asset condition raised. In terms of the specific question, I agree. I mean, I know the location you're talking about. I know some of the roads on the diversion route, and that's something that we will have to take seriously, I think, because you're correct, you know, that it is going to involve traffic displaced when we come to do some of the work in Clun, and we'll work with our coordination team to look at the diversion routes and also do a full assessment of the condition of them prior to the scheme and prior to that coming into being. So I'm quite happy to take that away as a question and a consideration for when we move into the delivery phase. So thank you for your question.
That's great. Thanks very much. Bruce, is your sound working yet?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Fantastic.
Okay, great. I've just changed the headphones. Yeah, just going back to the previous question, I think our DFT proposal would be looking to try and put in some attenuation in the carriageway to try and store some water whilst the river was high, which it would be a struggle because we would need depth on the surface water system. So would have to be some analysis carried out for that part of it. In regard to the wall alongside the river, I think there'd need to be quite a bit of comprehensive modelling carried out to ensure we're not just pushing the problem on somewhere else. But I mean, that's certainly something we can discuss with the Environment Agency to see if any local flooding can be alleviated around the bridge there.
That's great. Okay, thanks very much for that, Bruce. Next question, please. Yep, a hand up at the front.
Ros Barker. Probably a slightly more specific question than the others that have been asked. How do you propose to stop Buffalo Lane being used as a shortcut to avoid slower traffic going the long way round up Bridge Street and through the square?
Who can take this one? Sam, is this one for you?
Yeah, I guess it is. In terms of specific locations, obviously at the moment we're looking at the sort of the vision that's been prepared is quite a high level. It's very almost like a strategy. So the details about specific routes would come as part of the future design works, and you know, it will have been captured as a sort of like a key constraint, a key issue as part of the work already done. And I think that it's something that we would document to take forward, so that when we looked at sort of each specific area for improvements, the various issues, so the sort of the rat running, if you like, at Buffalo Lane would be taken into consideration at that point, and then measures appropriate to that would be identified. I think at the moment I wouldn't want to, you know, give a specific solution because, you know, we're just not at that point in the process yet. I appreciate that's quite a woolly answer, but yeah, we can certainly take that forward, that the Buffalo Lane's a problem and an issue in that context.
That's great. Thanks very much, and thanks for the question, Ros. Next question.
It's just a follow-up from me, Glyn Hughes. It's a follow-up to what Sam said, really, rather than a question. As one of the working group, I can say that although we've been talking very generally about strategy, inevitably certain specifics have come up to inform that. And Buffalo Lane is one of those that we did discuss in relation to the development of the general strategy. So it is clearly in the minds of the working group.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Glyn. Another question. Who else? Who wants to go next? Yep, hand up there.
Sorry, Bob Carvey again. Change of subject completely. Parking. I noted on some of the drawings on the stuff here tonight, and in the appendices that was attached to the online presentation, that the working group that wandered round in January 21 identified lots of faults and interesting bits to look at. But parking is a huge problem, well, everywhere, let alone Clun. And I've noted that in the street, I've not got this quite right, but the streetwise was, anyway, the changing of the pathways and things. Wider paths want putting in, but whole areas, for instance, it looked like in the town, in Market Square, in the town square there, that losing all of the parking there to widen the paths and things. I can see the logic, but where are you going to allow cars to park? What additional parking is going to be put in? Because unless, quite frankly, you want to kill the town, because if people will just drive through if they can't park, people won't come and live here if they can't park. What is going to be done about parking? I know it's a hard one, but you can't just take away parking and not replace it somewhere. It's tight enough as it is. And if we want youngsters to move into the town, they automatically come with 2 cars these days. Half the houses in the town probably haven't got their own parking. I think some that have don't necessarily use it, but that's another issue. It's a serious problem that isn't specifically mentioned tonight by any of the people presenting, and it's not particularly mentioned in any of the written work, but it is a serious problem, and I've seen elsewhere where parking can kill an area because people just can't be bothered. We'll just drive through. We'll go on to Knighton. There's a centre there for the walk. We'll go and have a look around there. We won't stay and look around the castle. We won't do the town trail because we can't park. And you've got all the residents which are keeping the wealth here and keeping the shops open, keeping the pubs run. It's a big issue, which I think looks as though it's kind of being ignored, but I'm sure it's not. But it needs to feature in writing somewhere, please.
Thanks very much for that, Bob. I'm going to bring in Sam to talk about this.
Yeah, so yeah, in all of the work that's been done to date, parking is an ongoing issue. It is something that we are aware of. A lot of the sketches and the drawings that are shown in the document are they are kind of quite high level. They are a vision. We did mention briefly about formalising on-street parking and looking at opportunities where we can incorporate parking into the proposals. And so I just sort of urge a word of caution that where we have shown sort of areas of wide footway, that's obviously not the final detailed proposal. And it's something that we're looking at a high level strategy for parking at the moment, and that's something that will be incorporated in sort of more detailed plans as they're taken forwards, so that we can make consideration for the parking that's needed, not only for the residents that live here, because appreciate there isn't, most houses don't have their own parking, particularly along the high street, and they are reliant on street parking, but also for the visitors that come. Yeah, that's another key consideration that will be sort of captured in the work as it goes forwards.
Thanks very much for that, Sam. Another question?
Hi, just staying on the parking issue. In a short term, has there been any opportunity to use the existing Clun garage site for overspill parking, particularly for this summer and maybe for next year until any proposed development actually occurs.
Who can answer that best?
I can pick that up. I mean, I'll be honest, it's a new one. I haven't even considered that point. But what I think it's best that we do is maybe take that one away as an action and provide some feedback. I mean, there's probably a bit of detail that we need to understand about that opportunity and whether that would be something that we could consider or would make sense, certainly short term. So if that's okay, we'll take that one away as an action to follow that up.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy. Any more questions? Have we got another question?
Nigel Hartin. It was a follow-on really on the parking issue. I'm aware that both the working group and the town council have been discussing issues about potential extensions to parking arrangements within town, looking at, for instance, whether or not the area of land off Castle Street, Enfield Street is a possibility, and also whether or not there's a possibility to extend the car park down at the river. But as of yet, although that's being looked at, we haven't got any firm proposals, I think, that have come forward in that respect. But it's certainly in the minds of both the town council and the working group.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to take that as a comment rather than a question, Nigel, if that's fair enough. Have we got any other questions? I'm not seeing any hands.
So I'm just out of camera sight. So it's Ryan here, Town Council.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Just again on parking, you can throw as much parking as you want in Clun, but you'll still have the person who's, I'm only popping into the shop for 2 minutes to get a bottle of milk, and 2 minutes can cause 45 minutes of absolute chaos. So unless there's actually going to be some sort of enforcement, there's no, it's not probably going to work. And, if you have a warden who comes every Thursday, everyone will know not to park there on a Thursday, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, you're still going to have the same problems. That's more of a comment, really. The other question I have is on budgets. And obviously the Department for Transport sanctioned this award some time back, and prices have escalated out of all sense over the last few months. Is the project as it stands, or how you're foreseeing it, still affordable in the fact that you're going to do quite a lot of work here? There's no, if we start cutting corners, it could potentially create a bigger problem. And the final thing is on signage. I think we've got to be very clear. Labelled as advisory. From experience and speaking to some lorry drivers, they will see advisory as challenge, and therefore we'll have a go and see why it is an advisory, and we'll take the consequence when we find it. Likewise, the A488 comes in from Wales, and that has challenges in terms of how signage is displayed. The Welsh Language Act, you've got to have it translated into Welsh. It's got to be the first language. So if lorry drives past sign, trying to understand what the Welsh bit is, he's missed it. And also if it says avoid Clun, if you've just driven up from Milford Haven, are you going to know where Clun is?
Okay, thanks very much. So we've got 3 questions there on the parking and the affordability. I'm going to pass over to Andy.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Yeah. In terms of budgets, Ryan, I mean, you're right. It's something that's very much a big issue at the moment for us in terms of looking at what the impact of hyperinflation is going to be on our budgets and our programs of work. And of course, this project is one of many sitting within our forward plan and our capital program. And we've got some really significant pieces of work and projects sitting in there for the next financial year, which we're currently having to review. I mean, the highways industry as a whole is aware of this and looking at how this what can be done to potentially alleviate it or offset some of these cost implications. The budget that we've provided for by the DFT is the same as every other. It's capped. It's not inflationary linked. And even if it was, you know, it wouldn't be keeping pace with the current levels. So we've got to bear that in mind. We've got to be alive to that issue and aware of it, and look at the opportunities along the way. That there's always routes to find, you know, smarter or more innovative ways of making these budgets work. You know, some of the main costs are probably going to, you know, it's going to be very difficult to do that, being open and honest, but we will look at every opportunity to attract more funding to this project. You know, the money that we've got so far is the money that we've got, but, you know, I think this is a really interesting piece of work, and I think there's other potential for us to tap into funding streams that we perhaps haven't got to yet. So we will look at trying managing that the best way we can going forward, but it's an issue that's affecting, you know, not just highway projects, but lots of other things at the moment, and we'll just cope with it the best we can.
Okay, thanks very much. And I'm going to pass over to Sam to say a word on the signage question.
Yeah, so on the signage, and I think you're quite right. You know, if you do put an advisory on it, that you will get those lorry drivers that you're quite right, you know, we'll want to see what the advisory is about. And I think that at the moment, I'd just like to say that, you know, the final sign design hasn't been determined. That's sort of the next package of work. And as part of that, I think agreeing within the legal constraints that we have to follow for sign design, agreeing the wording and the message and how that's presented is something that will need quite careful consideration, and something that we'll have to work with the local community, Shropshire, and also all the neighbouring local authorities as well, to develop something that we all feel will give the best outcome on that. On the Welsh language issue, again, we've already spoken to the neighbouring local authorities about this, and sort of shared some indicative signage with them and how that's communicated, and they're aware of the issues as well. You know, they're more than aware of the issues that Clun has with HGVs moving through it, and sort of coming from their patch, if you like, and that's why, as part of the sort of the design of the signs, to get the message that's as clear as possible, whilst making sure we stick with all the regulatory framework that we have to for sign design, is a key part of that, and a sort of any part of the detailed design of it. So the next stage of work, as I said, it'll be sort of a collaborative effort between everybody to ensure that the messages that are presented are not only follow the legal guidelines we have to for sign design, but also you know, represent the best message that we can get across. And I think as part of that process, there'll be wider communication on the full detail of what's planned and implemented. Will happen in due course once that's happened.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Sam.
Thanks for your comments.
Have we got any more questions this evening? Yeah, one more.
Yeah, thank you. It's Nigel again. Just one following on from the point that Ryan raised about funding for potential cost overruns. If there are overruns of whatever figure, is it possible that we might be able to use some of the community infrastructure levy that Shropshire Council holds back for priority projects, of which this must be one? I'm just wondering whether or not that might be an additional funding pot that we could tap into if there are cost overruns.
Yeah, yeah. Just, I mean, the community infrastructure levy is a possible source of funding. I think we'd have to look at the detail around that. But yeah, I think all of that's a consideration. And certainly, if some of the work that we're proposing here met the criteria for that, then I can see no genuine reason why that wouldn't be a consideration. But I think it's probably one of a number. But it shouldn't be ruled out, certainly, as a possibility that if funding pressures are in existence, then it's worth considering. So yeah, absolutely, as a takeaway, we'll happily look into that and give that consideration.
Great, thanks very much, Andy. Any more questions? Yep, another one at the front.
Hello. Following on from signage, we're talking about physical signs put up on the side of the road. What about Google Maps and implications of giving the sign the information to Google themselves, so that people who are accessing map details online can actually see what they need to see. Is this a possibility? Can you actually speak to Google and tell them that there are restrictions in Clun and people should be aware of it?
Thanks, right. Sam, do you want to come in on that?
Yep. So in terms of speaking to Google, it's not something that I'm sort of aware of. Obviously, you know, in terms of the street view, a lot of people, I'm all quite aware, a lot of people use that as a tool for navigation, and that's regularly updated. I know in terms of so satellite navigations, people like the Road Hauliers Association, they have regular liaison with the sat-nav manufacturers to update, to get restrictions and such updated. It's not something I'm aware of, but it's certainly something, a comment I can take away and we can look into, and we can sort of consider that for the future and provide some direct feedback on that. I think that's probably the best one for that one.
Okay, thanks very much. Was there another question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom Barker. I live in one of the damper parts of Clun with the Ros here, and I have a question and a comment. The comment is, I'd just like to thank everybody. It seems very positive, and I'm very encouraged by looking at what has been proposed. I'm optimistic. My question is a slight tangent. It's made considerably worse by traffic continuing to drive down Bridge Street and over the bridge, particularly those, as Ryan, I think, did you say about being encouraged or egged on by a challenge? They see it as a challenge to go through the water, which doesn't really help us who are trying to keep it out. Just wondered whether anybody had any thoughts about what could be done about that. Thank you.
I think we might have missed a couple of words on that, I'm afraid. Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
So my question was, when we are essentially have water outside our house in the road, it's made considerably worse by traffic, mostly 4x4s, obviously thinking it a challenge to go through the flood, over the bridge, and making our situation worse. Is there anything that might be done about that? Okay,
so we're saying when there is a flood there, some cars choose to say, right, I'll go through it at high speed and spray water all over the place. Okay, who wants to take that one?
I mean, I'm happy to pick that up. And yeah, thank you, Tom. I mean, it's an issue actually that we experienced quite similar to that in Shrewsbury recently when streets were flooded, and the only thing that we can, I mean, it's just common courtesy, isn't it? I mean, it's just trying to relay that message to people that obviously you know, consideration needs to be given to adjacent properties and people if flood waters are in existence. I think the only thing that we can perhaps do is look at some sort of signage that could potentially come out when the river is in flood, and then, you know, just remind people that that's that they need to be considerate. I'm struggling really beyond that, if I'm honest, Tom. It's one of those general sort of issues that tends to crop up, and it's quite a difficult one to manage.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy. Have you got any more questions?
I think mine's more a comment. I moved into the area a couple of years ago, and I heard that there were signs to warn trucks to stay away from Clun, and I started looking for them, and I found them really hard to see. And I realized that some of them are in black and white, and they seem to get lost. And, you know, if I was a truck driver, I probably would have gone by them as many times as I had gone by them many times before I actually spotted them. And some are black and white, and some I think are blue and white. So, you know, is there any way of making them more visible and stand out more?
Sam, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, and you know, I think we spotted it as part of our works that the consistency isn't there, like you say, and some of them are quite hard to see, either because of how they're presented or where they're located. And I think that's a key consideration of the work that we'll be taking forward is ensuring that signs not only make sense and are clear from a message perspective, but they're also, you know, they are visible to drivers of HGVs who may not be familiar with the area, may not be looking out for the sign. So there are certainly things that can be done to make them more visible. We obviously need to sort of trade that off with, particularly as we get closer to Clun, the streetscape, and being mindful of the sort of the vision that we've set out for that. But there are certainly measures such as you may have seen, the sort of fluorescent backboards that you can have on signage, that kind of thing, which can be put in place certainly to make them more visible and consistent as well. That's a key theme of the work that will be taken forward is that consistency. So yeah, thanks for that comment. That's very helpful.
Thank you. We're nearly out of time, but I think we've got time to squeeze in one more question if anyone has one. Any more questions? I'm not seeing anyone.
I nearly had my quota, haven't I? Yeah. Has anyone ever considered putting up permanent CCTV in the square and on the bridge to capture people effectively breaking the law or making a mess of parking stroke incorrect driving, and then they can be prosecuted and pay the price?
Andy, do you want to come in on that one?
This isn't an area of particular expertise for me, if I'm honest. So I'd have to take some counsel on this in terms of whether that's something that we could consider or is a viable option. I'm really not too sure, if I'm honest. So I'd need to sort of take that one away unless any of my colleagues have got a better understanding or view on it.
Andy, Ryan here from the Town Council. There is a CCTV camera on the bridge, but I don't think anyone actually knows if it works or who looks at it. And there's always been a bit of an issue with Town Council a few years ago approached Shropshire Council and said we'd take ownership of it, but then it all turned into GDPR issues. And it was a costly event. Like when something was reported to Shropshire Council, we think the bridge was hit between 9 o'clock Saturday morning and 9 p.m. Saturday night. Somebody at Shropshire Council had to go through literally 12 hours of CCTV, and was it or wasn't it cost effective? So there's issues on that one, I think.
Okay, I think it's one for us to feed back on, Ryan.
That's right. Okay, well, the team can take that away and take a look at that. We are nearly out of time, so I will end the questions there if that's okay. I'd like to say thank you very much indeed to all the speakers this evening. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's come along to hear what we have to say, and to everyone who's asked a lot of very good questions. The last thing I'll do before we say goodbye is just share with you, for those who haven't seen, this is the virtual room where you can have your say online. It's pinpointcloud.co.uk/clun. It'll be shared on Facebook and all the social media. But just to give a couple of features, you can book a consultation. So if you want to have a one-to-one consultation with our experts, if you've got a particular question or issue you want to look into, then you can just click on there and book a consultation. And around this room, you can look at it on your phone or your computer. You can see the exhibition boards, which you've got in the room tonight, and lots more information besides. So, yeah, please do take the time to go and have a look at the website pinpointcloud.co.uk/clun and see the information. And as I say, if you want to book a consultation, then please do. That's all for this evening. So we're at 7:29. So fantastic timing. We'll let you all get on. But once again, thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to come out this evening. We really do appreciate it. And I hope that you found this evening useful. And I hope that you go on to the website and have your say, so that we can gather everyone's comments and make sure that the outcome for Clun is as good as it can possibly be. So thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone.